Something is coming for Fraser's Ridge, and this time, no amount of swords, medicine, or sheer Fraser stubbornness is going to stop it. Episode 4 of Outlander's final season does something quietly cruel. It does not open with gunfire or battlefield. Chaos. It opens with the ridge feeling almost normal, almost safe. And that is exactly how it gets you. Because just when you start to breathe again, just when you think Jamie and Claire have finally found the life they've fought so hard to build, the episode pulls the floor right out from under everything. There is a loss coming in this episode. The kind you see charging at you from a distance. It's the kind that walks in through the front door wearing a familiar face. The kind that makes you sit there staring at your screen thinking they cannot do this. Not now, not to them. And that is what makes this episode one of the most emotionally heavy hours of the entire final season. It is not about the revolution happening outside the ridge. It is about what the revolution is quietly destroying inside it. Inside the people who live there. Inside the family that has held that land together through fire, time, exile, and grief. So if you thought the hardest parts of this season were already behind you, this episode is about to prove you very, very wrong. This is the recap of Outlander Season 8, Episode 4. And there is a lot to unpack. To really feel the weight of what Episode 4 is doing. You have to remember exactly where Episode 3 left us, because the writers did not give us even a moment to recover before piling on more by the end of Episode 3. Titled Abyss Fraseri, the Fraser family is carrying something that would crush most people before breakfast. Brianna has read enough of Frank Randall's research to know something that no daughter should ever have to know about her father. The historical record points toward Jamie Fraser dying at the Battle of Kings Mountain. Not maybe. Not possibly. The record says he was there, and the battle was brutal. And the math is not good. Brianna is walking around Fraser's Ridge, smiling at her father at dinner. Watching him sharpen his sword by the fire. Listening to him laugh with Claire in the next room. And she is carrying this enormous, unbearable secret in her chest. Like a stone she cannot put down. Roger knows it too. And Roger, a man who traveled through time and studied history long before he ever knew he would live inside it, understands better than anyone what it means when the historical record says something happened. He knows that time is not always kind. He knows that changing what is already written is not as simple as wanting it badly enough. And Claire, the woman who has pulled people back from the edge of death more times than anyone can count, who has faced down disease and war and loss with steady hands and a clear head. Even Claire is starting to feel something she rarely allows herself to feel. She is starting to feel afraid in a way that her medical training cannot fix, because there is no herb for this, no surgery for this, no procedure that takes away the possibility of losing the man she crossed centuries for. That is the emotional ground Episode 4 walks out onto. The ridge is not just a piece of land anymore. It is a place where people are trying to hold on to each other with everything they have, while history slowly, steadily tries to pull them apart. Jamie himself is moving through this episode with the particular energy of a man who has made peace with hard things. He is not reckless. He is not dramatic about any of it. That is actually what makes watching him so difficult in these early scenes. He is calm. He is purposeful. He is organizing, planning, preparing, talking to his men, checking on his people. Being exactly the leader Fraser's Ridge has always needed him to be. And every single moment of that quiet strength feels like something precious that is slipping through your fingers one grain at a time. Claire watches him. She is always watching him in this episode. Not in the way a worried wife watches a husband. She does not trust to take care of himself. In the way a person watches something beautiful that they have somehow been lucky enough to have in their life. And they are storing every detail of it away somewhere deep and safe inside themselves. Just in case. War has a sound before it arrives. It is not the sound of cannons or marching boots. It is the sound of men talking in low voices around a fire at night. It is the sound of a woman sharpening a knife she hopes she never has to use. It is the sound of children being put to bed a little earlier than usual because the adults need time to talk about things children should not hear yet. That is the sound filling Fraser's Ridge in episode 4. And the moment you recognize it, your stomach drops straight to the floor. Jamie Fraser does not pace. He does not wring his hands or stare at the ceiling. When Jamie is preparing for something dangerous, it gets very still and very focused, and that stillness is somehow more frightening than any amount of visible panic would be. In these early battle preparation scenes, you watch him move through the ridge like a man who has already thought through every possible outcome and made his decision about each one. He talks to his militia with the kind of directness that makes men feel steadier just by being near him. He does not promise them safety because Jamie has never been the kind of leader who lies to make people comfortable. He promises them that whatever comes, they will face it together and on Fraser's Ridge. That promise has always meant something real. But here is what the camera keeps catching that Jamie himself does not seem to notice. Every time he turns his back to walk away from a conversation, the men he just spoke to exchange a look with each other. A quiet look. The kind that says they all know something is building toward a point that none of them are sure they will. Walk back from these are not boys playing at Revolution. These are fathers, farmers, and neighbors who have built lives on this ridge. And they are now being asked to pick up muskets and march toward one of the most violent moments in American history. The fact that they are willing to do it because Jamie Fraser asked them to says everything about the kind of man he is and everything about the weight sitting on his shoulders right now. Roger Mackenzie's position in all of this is unlike anyone else's on the ridge, and episode 4 leans into that in a way that is genuinely fascinating to watch. Roger is a man from the future. He sat in university classrooms and read about the Battle of Kings Mountain in history books. He knows the outcome. He knows the date. He knows the casualty numbers in the kind of clean academic way. Facts from a textbook. And now he is standing in the middle of it, breathing the same air as men who are about to become those numbers. And the gap between knowing history and living inside it has never felt wider or more painful for him. What do you do with that kind of knowledge? Roger has been wrestling with this question since he first came through the stones. But episode 4 pushes it harder than it ever has before, because it is not abstract anymore. It is not a philosophical problem to turn over quietly in his head. On a long walk, it is Jamie. It is his family. His people he has sat at a table with and laughed with and grieved with. And the historical record that lives in his memory is telling him things about their futures that he has no clean or painless way to act on. He cannot rewrite the Battle of Kings Mountain by wanting it badly enough. He knows that. But he also cannot stand there doing nothing and pretend that the knowledge in his head does not exist. So, Roger in this episode is doing something that costs him enormously. He is choosing very deliberately what to say and what to stay silent about. He is making calculated decisions about which pieces of what he knows might actually help and which pieces would only destroy the people. He loves without changing a single thing. That kind of controlled silence, when you are desperate to say, everything is its own form of suffering, and the actor carries it in every scene, without ever having to say a word about it directly. Brianna is a different kind of weight entirely. Where Roger is holding his knowledge at arm's length and trying to be strategic about it, Brianna is drowning in hers. She is her father's daughter in almost every way. Which means she is stubborn and fierce and deeply, almost dangerously protective of the people she loves. And right now, the person she is most desperate to protect is the one person on the ridge who does not need or want her protection. Because Jamie Fraser is not a man who goes quietly into anything. Watch the scenes between Brianna and Jamie in this section of the episode very carefully. Because the writers are doing something layered and a little heartbreaking with them. On the surface, they are just a father and daughter talking. Normal conversation. practical things about the ridge, about the militia, about preparations being made. But underneath every single exchange is this current of emotion that neither of them is willing to name out loud. Because naming it would make it real in a way that neither of them is ready to face. Brianna looks at Jamie the way you look at something you are terrified of losing. And Jamie, because he is Jamie, and he sees everything even when he pretends not to, looks back at her with a gentleness that tells you he understands more about what she is carrying than she realizes. Claire is the thread that holds the preparation, scenes together emotionally. She is not standing at the edges of the battle planning, wringing her hands. She is in the middle of it, as she always is. Being practical and useful and keeping her fear folded neatly out of sight where it cannot interfere with the work. History has never been kind to the people who lived inside it. That is the thing textbooks never really teach you. They give you dates and battle names and outcomes, clean and organized on a printed page, and they make the past feel like something that was always going to happen exactly the way it happened, like it was inevitable. Like the people caught inside those events were simply moving along a track that had already been laid down for them long before they were born. But Outlander has spent 8 seasons arguing against that idea with everything it has, and episode 4 is perhaps the most honest and most painful version of that argument this show has ever made. Because what this episode understands, in a way that settles into your chest and stays there, is that history is not made of dates and outcomes. It is made of people standing in kitchens and fields and doorways, making unbearable choices with shaking hands and love in their hearts and absolutely no guarantee that any of it is going to be enough. Jamie Fraser is not a footnote in a colonial record. Ian Murray is not a supporting character in somebody else's war. These are people, fully formed, deeply loved, irreplaceable people. And the revolution grinding toward its conclusion outside. The borders of Fraser's Ridge does not care about that even slightly. Episode 4 is the point in Season 8 where the show stops, letting you hold on to the comfortable belief that love will be enough to change what is coming. It has let you hold on to that belief for 3 episodes now. It has given you warmth and reunion and the particular relief of watching Jamie and Claire back on the ridge they built together. Surrounded by family, moving through their days with something that almost looked like peace. It gave you all of that deliberately and with full knowledge of what it was about to do with it. Because the warmth had to be real for the loss of it to land the way it needs to land. You cannot grieve, something you never fully believed in. And this show made you believe in Fraser's Ridge completely before it started quietly dismantling it. The Murray storyline does not resolve cleanly by the end of this episode, and that is one of the most important creative decisions the writers make here. Television loves resolution. It loves the moment where the impossible choice gets made. And the music tells you how to feel about it, and the camera pulls back and you understand that, whatever happened, the story has found its footing again. Episode 4 refuses that comfort entirely. Eon's situation does not wrap up. The weight of what he has chosen or not yet chosen does not lift from his shoulders by the final scene. It sits there, unresolved and heavy and real, exactly the way real. Impossible choices sit with real people long after the moment of decision has passed. That unresolved weight is going to ripple through the remaining episodes of this season in ways that are going to matter enormously when we get to King's Mountain and everything that follows from it. Roger and Brianna carry something out of this episode that they did not carry into it, and the difference is visible in the way they move through the closing scenes. There is a particular kind of knowledge that changes you permanently once you have it. Not the intellectual, historical knowledge Roger arrived in this century with. Something newer and harder than that. The knowledge of what it actually looks and sounds and feels like when the people you love most are genuinely running out of time. Roger has been living with historical awareness of what is coming for a long time now. But awareness and witnessing are entirely different things. This episode makes him witness it in a way that no amount of prior knowledge could have prepared him for. And what that does to him quietly in these final scenes sets up something important about the man he is going to need to become before this season reaches its end. Brianna ends this episode doing something that is completely characteristic of her and completely heartbreaking at the same time. It gets practical. She finds a task and she does it thoroughly, and she keeps her hands busy and she stays useful, and she does not fall apart. Because falling apart is a luxury she has decided she cannot afford right now. She is her father's daughter all the way down to the bone. And just like her father, the control she is maintaining in these closing scenes is costing her something that you can see accumulating quietly behind her eyes and every single shot the camera gives you of her face. That accumulation is not going to stay contained forever. Something is going to break it open eventually. And when it does, it is going to be one of the most important emotional moments of the entire final season. Claire's final scene in this episode is one of the most beautifully constructed pieces of television this show has produced in years. And it does not announce itself as anything special at all. It is just Claire alone for a moment in the place, on the ridge where she feels most herself. No one needing her attention, no crisis demanding her expertise. Just a woman standing in a quiet space with her thoughts, and the camera simply staying with her long enough for you to see everything she has been holding back for the entire episode move across her face in one long unguarded wave. She does not cry. Claire Fraser very rarely cries in the way you might expect her to, which is part of what makes the moments when her emotion surfaces so quietly devastating. She simply stands there and feels it, all of it. The fear and the love and the exhaustion and the fierce, stubborn refusal to let any of it stop her. And then she breathes, and she straightens, and she walks back toward the ridge and the people waiting for her there. That walk back is what this episode is ultimately about. Not the battle preparations or the impossible choice or the prophecy hanging over everything like a storm cloud that will not move. It is about people who have every reason to stop, who have been given more pain and more loss and more uncertainty than any reasonable version of life should hand a person. It's choosing to walk back anyway. It's choosing to return to the people they love, and the life they have built, and the fight they have decided is worth having, even knowing what that fight might cost them. That is what Fraser's Ridge has always stood for. That is what this show, at its very best, has always been about. And here is the thing about episode 4 that you need to carry with you into everything that comes next this season. The unexpected loss this episode delivers is not the last one. The writers are not done. King's Mountain is still coming, and history has already written down what happens there. And Jamie Fraser is still walking toward it with that particular calm that makes you want to reach through the screen and grab his arm and tell him to stop. The losses still ahead in this final season are going to build on everything episode 4 has laid down here. And what Ian Murray chose, what Roger and Brianna witnessed, what Claire pushed back down beneath the surface with that long, steady breath. All of it is going to matter when the season reaches its most devastating point. So hold on to Fraser's Ridge while you still can. Hold on to the warmth of it and the people in it and the version of this family that still exists right now in episode 4. Imperfect and frightened and stubbornly, beautifully intact. Because Outlander's final season is not finished asking hard things of the people who live there, or of the people watching from the other side of the screen who have loved this story long enough to know exactly how much it is capable of taking away. Episode 5 is already waiting. And if episode 4 is anything to go by, it is not going to be gentle about what it brings with it.